Look at your hand right now. The one holding your phone or resting beside you, 5 fingers, an opposable thumb. The ability to grip with precision or power, that hand has a history stretching back 6 million years. A history of ancestors you've never heard of. Species that lived and died and left you everything you have tonight. We're going to meet them. 6 million years. That is how long ago our lineage split from the ancestors of chimpanzees. 6 million years of evolution, of species rising and falling, of adaptations accumulated and abandoned, of a slow transformation from something that lived in trees to something that builds cities. And almost none of it is remembered. If you are settling in for the night, this is perfect company. The forgotten story of your ancestors, the species that came before you but left no written record, the 6 million year journey from forest ape to whatever we are now. Subscribe and stick around. Let's start with what we know and what we don't. We know that humans and chimpanzees share a common ancestor. The genetic evidence is overwhelming. We're more closely related to chimps than chimps are to gorillas. Somewhere around 6 million years ago, our lineage diverged. But here is the thing. We don't have a fossil of that common ancestor. We don't know exactly what it looked like or how it lived. The moment of divergence is invisible to us. We can only infer it from what came before and what came after. The earliest members of our lineage after the split are fragmentary at best. Sahelanthropus chadendensis, from roughly 7 million years ago. We have a skull and some teeth. That is it. Was it on our lineage or a side branch? We can't be certain. Ororhyntugenensis, from about 6 million years ago, a few teeth, some thigh bone fragments, hints of bipedalism, but not enough to reconstruct a life, a behavior, a story, just tantalizing scraps that raise more questions than they answer. This is the reality of studying deep human history. The fossil record is sparse. Most individuals who ever lived left no trace at all. We're reconstructing 6 million years of evolution from a handful of bones scattered across a continent. And yet, from those fragments, a story emerges. Not a complete story, not a certain story, but a story nonetheless. The story of how tree-dwelling apes became ground-walking humans, how forest creatures became savanna hunters, how one lineage among many became the only one left standing. The first major change was bipedalism, walking upright on 2 legs. This happened early, perhaps within 1 million years of the split, long before our brains expanded. Long before we made sophisticated tools, we were walking upright while still having ape-sized brains. Why did bipedalism evolve? There are many theories. Freeing the hands to carry food or babies, seeing over tall grass in the savanna, reducing sun exposure in hot environments, traveling long distances more efficiently. Probably some combination of all of these. The oldest clear evidence of bipedalism comes from Ardipithecus ramidus, nicknamed Ardi, about 4.4 million years old. Ardi could walk upright but was also comfortable in trees. A transitional form, living between 2 worlds, adapted to neither perfectly. Then came the Australopithecines, a diverse group that dominated our lineage from about 4 million to 2 million years ago. Multiple species spread across Africa. Lucy's species, Australopithecus afarensis, the robust forms like Paranthropus. Others we're still discovering. Lucy herself, discovered in 1974, revolutionized our understanding. A skeleton nearly 40% complete, remarkably rare. She lived about 3.2 million years ago, walked upright confidently, but had a brain not much larger than a chimp's. Think about that. Lucy was your ancestor, or close to it. She walked the East African landscape over 3 million years ago. She lived and died and became sediment, and somehow, against astronomical odds, her bones survived to tell her story. The Australopithecines were successful. They persisted for over 2 million years. They spread across much of Africa. They adapted to different environments and diets. If success is measured in duration, they were far more successful than modern humans have been so far, but they didn't become us. Most Australopithecine lineages went extinct without descendants. Only one line continued, eventually giving rise to the genus Homo, our genus, the group that includes modern humans and our closest extinct relatives. The transition to Homo happened roughly 2.5 to 3 million years ago. We see changes in multiple traits around this time. Brains getting larger, bodies getting taller, hands becoming more dexterous, stone tools appearing in the archaeological record. Homo habilis, the handy human, was one of the earliest members of our genus. Their brains were significantly larger than Australopithecines. They made stone tools consistently. They might have been the first to hunt rather than just scavenge. The stone tools themselves tell a story. The Oldowan tradition, simple flakes struck from cores. Not impressive by later standards, but revolutionary for their time. The first clear evidence that our ancestors were deliberately shaping the world to suit their needs. If you are still with me, consider what tools mean. They mean foresight, planning, the ability to imagine a future need and prepare for it. Even simple stone tools require thinking ahead, understanding cause and effect, transmitting knowledge between generations. Then came Homo erectus, perhaps the most successful human species ever. Emerging around 2 million years ago, they persisted for nearly 2 million years. They spread out of Africa into Asia. They may have controlled fire. They definitely made more sophisticated tools. Homo erectus fossils have been found from Africa to Indonesia to China to Europe. They were the first global human. In a sense, colonizing environments their ancestors never could have survived in, adapting to different climates through behavior and technology. Their tools, called Acheulean, after the site where they were first identified, show a leap in cognitive ability. Hand axes shaped on both sides, symmetrical, standardized. Made the same way across continents and across hundreds of thousands of years. Think about what that standardization means. A tool tradition persisting for over 1 million years, spread across 3 continents. Knowledge being transmitted with remarkable fidelity culture, in some rudimentary form, already operating as an evolutionary force. But Homo erectus wasn't the only human species around. During the last 2 million years, multiple human species coexisted. Homo heidelbergensis, Homo naledi, the Denisovans, the Neanderthals, and eventually Homo sapiens, US. This is one of the most surprising discoveries of recent decades. For most of human history, we weren't alone. Multiple human species walked the earth simultaneously, sometimes in the same regions, sometimes apparently interbreeding. The Neanderthals are the best known of our extinct relatives. Living in Europe and Western Asia from about 400,000 to 40,000 years ago, powerfully built, cold adapted. With brains as large as ours or larger, for a long time, Neanderthals were dismissed as brutish and primitive, unable to compete with sophisticated modern humans. That view has been completely overturned by recent research. Neanderthals were complex, capable, and creative in ways we're still discovering. They buried their dead, sometimes with grave goods. They made tools as sophisticated as contemporary Homo sapiens. They probably had language, or something close to it. They might have created art. They were human in every meaningful sense, and they're part of us. Most non-African humans carry 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. Our ancestors didn't just compete with Neanderthals, they interbred with them. We carry their genetic legacy in our cells tonight. The Denisovans are even more mysterious. Known primarily from a finger bone and a few teeth found in a Siberian cave. But their DNA tells us they were a distinct population, separate from both Neanderthals and modern humans. Modern Melanesians and some Asian populations carry significant Denisovan DNA, up to 6% in some groups. Another interbreeding event in our past, another extinct human species living on through their genetic contribution to us. And there were others. Homo floresiensis, the hobbit, survived in Indonesia until perhaps 50,000 years ago. Homo naledi, discovered in 2015, had a strange mix of primitive and advanced features. The human family tree keeps getting more crowded. The question that haunts this story is why? Why did all these other human species go extinct? Why are we the only ones left? What made Homo sapiens different? There is no single answer. Climate change certainly played a role. Competition for resources, maybe direct conflict, maybe just the accumulation of small advantages that compounded over time, maybe luck. What we do know is that by around 40,000 years ago, modern humans had spread across most of the old world, and by around 30,000 years ago, we were alone. Every other human species had vanished. Only Homo sapiens remained. If you are drifting off now, consider what was lost. Each extinct human species represented millions of years of evolution, unique adaptations, unique perspectives on existence, unique ways of being human. All of it gone except for what fragments remain in the fossil record and in our DNA. The Neanderthals had survived ice ages, had spread across a continent, had developed complex behaviors and possibly art. And then, over just a few thousand years after modern humans arrived, they disappeared. Whatever happened, it was rapid. But here is what is certain. We carry their genes. Neanderthal DNA influences our immune systems, our skin, our susceptibility to certain diseases. They didn't completely disappear. Part of them survives in us. The same is true of Denisovans. Their DNA helped some modern populations adapt to high altitudes. Tibetans carry a Denisovan gene variant that helps them survive in thin air. A gift from an extinct species to their descendants. This changes how we should think about our ancestry. We're not purely Homo sapiens. We're a mixture, a blend of multiple human species who met and merged over hundreds of thousands of years. Our genome is a palimpsest of human evolution. For the first 3 million years or so, our ancestors had brains not much larger than chimps. They walked upright, which was revolutionary. But cognitively, they were probably not dramatically different from other great apes. Language, as we know, it probably didn't exist. Complex tool-making was in its infancy. Art, music, religion, all the things we consider essentially human were absent or barely present. These were our ancestors, but they would seem alien to us. The expansion of the brain happened gradually over the last 2 million years. From about 400 cubic centimeters in Australopithecines to about 1400 in modern humans. A tripling in size with enormous implications. Bigger brains require more energy. About 20% of our caloric intake goes to running our brains. Our ancestors had to find ways to get more calories to afford this expansion. Meat eating, cooking, social hunting, all connected to brain growth. The control of fire was a turning point. We don't know exactly when it began, maybe as early as 1 million years ago with Homo erectus, maybe later. But once it started, it changed everything. Fire provided warmth, allowing expansion into cold climates. It provided protection from predators. It allowed cooking, which made more calories available from food. It created a focal point for social gathering. Fire made us who we are. Around the fire, our ancestors probably began to develop more complex communication. Stories perhaps, teaching. The transmission of knowledge that didn't have to be rediscovered each generation. The beginnings of cumulative culture. This cumulative culture is what distinguishes us from other animals. Chimps have culture, tools they learn from each other, but their tools don't improve over generations. They don't build on previous innovations. Ours do. That is the difference. At some point in the last 500,000 years, language emerged. Not the simple communication that even chimps can manage. True language with grammar, with abstraction, with the ability to talk about things that aren't present, that happened in the past, that might happen in the future. Language changed everything again. It allowed coordination at new scales. It allowed teaching with unprecedented precision. It allowed the creation of shared stories, shared identities, shared purposes. Language made possible societies of strangers. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, emerged in Africa somewhere between 300,000 and 200,000 years ago. For a long time, we stayed in Africa, one species among several. Then, around 70,000 years ago, something changed. Some researchers call it the behavioral revolution, a sudden appearance of art, jewelry, complex tools, long-distance trade, signs of symbolic thinking, that hadn't been clearly present before. Something clicked in the human mind. What we know is that modern humans began to spread out of Africa around 70,000 years ago, across the Middle East into Europe, across Asia, eventually to Australia, and finally much later to the Americas. Within 50,000 years, we had colonized every continent except Antarctica. We had displaced or absorbed every other human species. We had become the sole inheritors of 6 million years of evolution. And then, barely 10,000 years ago, another revolution: agriculture, settlements, cities, writing, the explosion of complexity that created the world we know today. A blink of an eye in the context of human evolution. Consider the proportions: 6 million years of human evolution, 2 million years of tool-making, 300,000 years of modern human anatomy, 70,000 years of behavioral modernity, 10,000 years of civilization, a few hundred years of science. We think of civilization as the human story, but it is just the latest chapter, a thin veneer on top of millions of years of different ways of being human. The deep story is the one we've been exploring tonight. Your body carries this history. The way you walk is an adaptation from 5 million years ago. Your large brain is an achievement of the last 2 million years. Your capacity for language might be only a few 100,000 years old. You are a living museum of human evolution. Every feature, every capacity, every quirk of your biology has a history, a story of ancestors who developed that trait and passed it to their children, eventually to you. Consider consciousness. The awareness that you are aware, the ability to think about thinking. We don't know when this emerged. We don't know if our earliest ancestors had it. It might have appeared gradually, or suddenly, or in forms we can't imagine. Did Homo erectus have inner lives? Did they experience joy and sorrow the way we do? Did they wonder about the stars, or fear death, or feel lonely? The fossils can't tell us. The inner world leaves no direct traces, but we can make educated guesses. The brain structures associated with emotion in humans existed in our ancestors. They had the same neurotransmitters, the same basic neural architecture. If we feel, probably they did too. This means emotion is old, older than humanity. The capacity to feel might be tens of millions of years old, inherited from ancestors who lived before the split with chimps. When you feel love or fear, you are using ancient neural machinery. Social complexity drove brain expansion. This is one of the leading theories. As groups got larger and relationships got more complex, the mental demands increased. Brains grew to keep up with the social environment. This creates a feedback loop. Larger brains enable more complex social structures. More complex structures select for larger brains. Round and round, pushing cognitive evolution forward. Social life as an evolutionary engine. The result is us. A species obsessed with social information, with gossip and reputation and relationships. We spend enormous mental energy on understanding what others think and want and believe. It is what our brains evolved to do. Evidence of care for the disabled appears in the fossil record. individuals who couldn't have survived alone, living to old age. Someone was feeding them, protecting them. Compassion is ancient too. A Homo erectus individual lived into old age, despite having lost all their teeth. Someone was preparing soft food for them, processing their meals, making their survival possible. 1,000,000 years ago, someone cared. These glimpses of ancient compassion are precious. They remind us that the 6 million-year story isn't just about survival of the fittest. It is also about care and cooperation and help given to those who couldn't repay it. Human children are born remarkably helpless compared to other primates. They take longer to mature. They require more care. This is connected to our large brains. Large brains need large heads, but large heads can't fit through the birth canal. The evolutionary solution was to birth humans early, with immature brains that continue developing outside the womb. We're all born premature in a sense. This extended childhood changes everything. More learning happens outside the womb. More cultural transmission is possible. The long dependence of children on adults makes human culture possible. Childhood is an evolutionary innovation. Grandparents matter too. Humans live longer after reproduction than any other primate. The grandmother hypothesis suggests that post-reproductive adults help their children's children survive. They provide childcare, food, knowledge. This means multi-generational cooperation was important in human evolution. Not just parents raising children, but grandparents and aunts and uncles and the wider community. Child rearing as a social project, the phrase "it takes a village to raise a child," has evolutionary truth. Human children evolved to be raised by groups, not isolated nuclear families. The nuclear family is a recent anomaly, not the ancestral condition. Most of them are anonymous. No names, no individual stories, just fragments of bone and stone that hint at lives lived long ago. We'll never know what they thought, what they felt, what they hoped for, but we can honor them by trying to understand, by piecing together what we can from the evidence, by acknowledging that we stand on the shoulders of countless generations who lived and died so that we could exist. The fossil hunters who dig in African sediments are doing sacred work. They're recovering our forgotten ancestors, giving names and stories to beings who otherwise would remain completely unknown, extending memory backward into deep time. And with each discovery, the story changes. New species found, old assumptions overturned. The family tree redrawn. What we know now will probably look incomplete in another 50 years. Science keeps revealing more. That is the nature of studying the deep past. We're always working with incomplete information, always revising our understanding, always aware that the next fossil could change everything we thought we knew. But the broad outlines seem clear. A split from the ape lineage 6 million years ago. Bipedalism early, brain expansion late. Multiple human species coexisting for most of our evolutionary history. And then, quite recently, just one left. Just one. That is us. The sole survivors of a once diverse family, inheritors of everything our ancestors developed, carriers of genes from species that no longer walk the earth, the last humans standing. But maybe not forever. we could go extinct too. Most species do eventually. The dinosaurs lasted over 160 million years. We've lasted maybe 300,000 in our modern form. We're the new kids on the block. Or we could diverge. Populations separated long enough evolve into different species. If we colonize other planets, if groups are isolated for long enough, our descendants might become multiple species again. The human family tree might branch again. Whatever happens, the 6 million year story will continue or end. Either way, we're part of something much larger than our individual lives, a lineage that stretches back to forest apes and forward to whatever comes next. Rest now knowing you are part of this ancient lineage, part of something much larger than yourself, part of a story that began 6 million years ago and will continue long after tonight ends. The ancestors sleep in their graves, most of them lost forever. But something of them survives in you, their genes, their evolved traits, their accumulated cultural knowledge. You are their legacy, and someday you'll be an ancestor too, part of someone else's evolutionary inheritance, part of the chain that stretches forward as well as backward. The story doesn't end with you either. Thanks for this journey through deep human history, through species and adaptations and mysteries, through 6 million years of forgotten story that made tonight possible. Subscribe and stick around. There is always more to explore, more ancestors to meet, more evolutionary puzzles to contemplate. The story of human origins never gets old. Sleep well, dream of ancient forests and expanding savannas, of fire and tools and language, of ancestors who faced the world with brains smaller than yours and survived. Anyway, good night from 6 million years of evolution, from every ancestor who ever lived, from the lineage that made you possible and continues through you. 6 million years. And here you are, remarkable. Good night. But before you drift away completely, there is more to this story worth exploring. The 6 million years weren't just about physical evolution. They were about the emergence of everything we consider most human mind-culture society. All of it has a history we're only beginning to understand. Let's talk about art for a moment. The oldest uncontested art appears in the archaeological record around 40,000 years ago. Cave paintings, carved figurines, decorated objects, signs of minds that could imagine things that don't exist. But there are hints of earlier symbolic behavior. Shell beads from Africa dating to over 100,000 years ago, ochre that might have been used for body painting. The behavioral revolution didn't come from nowhere. It built on earlier developments. What drove the creation of art? There are many theories: communication, magic identity marking, pure aesthetic pleasure. The exercise of cognitive capacities that had evolved for other purposes. Probably different art served different purposes at different times. Music is particularly mysterious. Every human culture has music. Every human responds to it. The capacity seems built-in universal. But what evolutionary purpose could it serve? Some suggest music strengthened social bonds. Singing and dancing together creates a sense of unity. Rhythmic coordination signals cooperation. Maybe music was a social technology before it was an art form. Others propose sexual selection, musical ability as a display of cognitive fitness. Like the peacock's tail, an advertisement of genetic quality, the musicians got more mates. Their musicality spread. Still, others argue music is a byproduct, a side effect of language capacity. The same neural circuits that process speech also respond to pitch and rhythm. Music might be language's accidental gift. Whatever its origins, music is part of human nature now. It seems to have been part of human nature for a very long time. Musical instruments appear in the archaeological record over 40,000 years ago. Bone flutes played by people long extinct. If Neanderthals made music, we may never know for certain. But given their complex behaviors and large brains, it seems plausible. The 6 million year story might have included a lot of singing around fires that have long since gone out. Religion, too, has deep roots. When did humans first believe in things they couldn't see? When did they first perform rituals? When did they first imagine an afterlife? Burial practices offer clues. Neanderthals buried their dead, sometimes with apparent grave goods. This suggests they thought death meant something, that the body deserved care, that perhaps something continued after death. But burial doesn't prove religion. Animals care for their dead without believing in gods. The earliest clear evidence of religious practice comes from modern human sites, ritual objects, temple structures, art that seems to represent supernatural beings. The development of religion might be connected to language to believe in gods. You need to talk about them. To share religious beliefs, you need to communicate abstract concepts. Language makes religion possible in a way that earlier communication couldn't. Some researchers believe religion was crucial for scaling up human societies. Small bands don't need shared gods. Everyone knows everyone, but larger groups need something to bind strangers together. Shared beliefs in shared supernatural forces might have been that something. Whether this theory is correct or not, religion certainly became important. Every complex society we know of has developed religious practices. The capacity for faith seems woven into human nature. Its origins lie somewhere in the 6 million year journey. Let's talk about violence too. Humans are capable of terrible violence. Wars, genocides, cruelty beyond imagination. Is this ancient? Is it part of our evolutionary heritage? Chimps engage in lethal violence. They kill members of their own species, sometimes deliberately and brutally. This suggests that lethal intraspecific violence predates the split with chimps. It has been with us a long time, but so is cooperation. Chimps also groom each other, share food, comfort the distressed. Humans have even greater capacities for both violence and kindness. We are not one or the other, we are both. The 6 million year story includes both. Ancestors who probably killed each other and cared for each other. Violence and compassion intertwined throughout. We inherited both tendencies. The development of weapons changed the equation. Stone tools can be used to kill as well as to process food. Spears extend violent reach. Arrows allow killing from a distance. Technology amplifies both cooperation and conflict. And yet, for most of human evolution, populations were small and dispersed. There weren't enough people to have wars in the modern sense. Interpersonal violence happened, but organized warfare required larger groups. Larger groups required certain kinds of social organization. Warfare probably became significant only in the last 10 to 20,000 years, after agriculture, after sedentism, after there was something worth fighting over that you couldn't just walk away from. Property created the conditions for war. This doesn't mean pre-agricultural humans were peaceful, but their violence was different. More personal, less systematic. The capacity for war existed, but the conditions for exercising it at scale didn't. Understanding this history matters for understanding ourselves. We're not inherently warlike or inherently peaceful. We're flexible, capable of both extreme violence and extraordinary cooperation. The circumstances shape which tendency dominates. The story of human evolution is also a story of migration. Our ancestors moved constantly. For millions of years, they expanded into new territories, faced new challenges, adapted to new environments. The first major expansion came with Homo erectus, around 2 million years ago, out of Africa into Asia, eventually into Europe. The first time members of our lineage lived on multiple continents. Then modern humans expanded again, starting around 70,000 years ago. This time, we went everywhere. Australia by 50,000 years ago. Europe by 45,000 years ago. The Americas by at least 15,000 years ago, possibly earlier. Each expansion required adaptation. New foods to eat. New climates to endure. New predators to avoid. New resources to exploit. The flexibility that defines humanity was forged through these expansions, and each expansion left genetic traces. Populations that lived in different environments accumulated different genetic variants, skin color, lactose tolerance, high-altitude adaptation. Genetic diversity follows the map of human migration, but the diversity is shallow. Despite appearances, all living humans are remarkably similar genetically. We're one species, recently spread across the globe. The differences that seem so important to us are surface variations on a shared foundation. The Toba eruption 74,000 years ago might explain this. As we discussed in another episode, a supervolcanic eruption might have reduced human populations to just a few thousand individuals. A genetic bottleneck that explains our low diversity, or maybe not Toba specifically, but some population bottleneck, or simply the fact that modern humans expanded from a small African population relatively recently. Our diversity hasn't had time to accumulate. Either way, the genetic evidence confirms what the fossil evidence suggests. We're all part of one story, all descendants of the same 6 million year journey, all inheritors of the same evolutionary heritage. The 6 million years also shaped our psychology. The fears we have, the pleasures we seek, the social dynamics we navigate, all of these have evolutionary histories. We fear snakes and heights and the dark because our ancestors who didn't were more likely to die before reproducing. Those fears kept them alive long enough to have children. We inherited the fears along with the genes. We seek sweet and fatty foods because those were rare and valuable during most of our evolution. Calories were hard to come by. The ancestors who craved them worked harder to find them. We carry their cravings into an age of abundance. We navigate complex social hierarchies because our ancestors did too. The social brain hypothesis suggests that much of our cognitive evolution was driven by social demands, understanding others, predicting their behavior, forming alliances, managing reputation. This explains why gossip is universal, why we care so much about what others think of us, why social rejection hurts so deeply. It activates the same brain regions as physical pain. Our brains evolved to prioritize social information. Understanding this doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it helps explain it. We're not blank slates. We come into the world with predispositions shaped by 6 million years of evolution. Working with those predispositions requires understanding them. The 6 million year story also includes love, pair bonding, the tendency for humans to form long-term mating partnerships. This is relatively unusual among great apes. Chimps don't pair bond. Gorillas have harems. We do something different. When did pair bonding evolve? We don't know precisely, but it might be connected to the long dependency of human children. If children need extended care, fathers who stick around help more offspring survive. Pair bonding might have evolved to help raise helpless infants, or it might be connected to concealed ovulation. Unlike chimps, human females don't advertise when they're fertile. Males can't monopolize mating opportunities as easily. Pair bonding might be a male strategy for ensuring paternity in the absence of fertility signals. Whatever the cause, love is part of our evolutionary heritage. The feelings we have for partners, the attachment we form with children, the bonds that tie families together, all shaped by millions of years of selection. But evolutionary heritage doesn't determine behavior. We're not slaves to our genes. Culture shapes how evolutionary tendencies express themselves. Different societies organize mating differently. Different individuals experience love differently. The capacity is inherited. The expression is learned. This is true for most human behaviors. The 6 million year journey gave us capacities. What we do with them is partly up to us. And we're still evolving. Evolution didn't stop when humans appeared. It continues today. Different populations face different selection pressures. People who live at high altitudes adapt to thin air. People who herd livestock adapt to digest milk. Future generations will be different from us, as we're different from our ancestors. The 6 million year journey continues through us and beyond us. We're not the end point. We're a way station. This can be humbling or inspiring depending on how you look at it. We're not the goal of evolution. There is no goal. Just an ongoing process that has produced us among many other outcomes. We're remarkable, but we're not inevitable. The forgotten ancestors we've discussed tonight deserve to be remembered, not because they were trying to create us, they weren't, but because they lived and died and contributed to what we are. Their struggles are our inheritance. Lucy walking the African savannah. Homo erectus controlling fire for the first time. Neanderthals burying their dead with care. These moments matter. They're part of our story even if they happen to species that no longer exist. And somewhere in those 6 million years, something emerged that had never existed before. A species that could reflect on its own evolution, that could understand where it came from, that could choose, to some extent, where it is going. That is you. That is us. Homo sapiens. The wise human, whether we live up to that name, remains to be seen. But we have capacities that no other species has ever had. What we do with them matters. The 6 million year story continues. What happens next is partly up to you. Not as an individual perhaps, but as part of a species making collective choices about its future. Evolution continues, but now we have some say in it. Tomorrow, you'll walk on feet shaped by 5 million years of bipedal evolution. You'll think with a brain that tripled in size over 2 million years. You'll speak with a capacity that might be only hundreds of thousands of years old, and you'll do it without thinking about it. The deep history will be invisible as it usually is. But tonight, tonight, you've heard the forgotten story. Tonight, the ancestors have been remembered. The story doesn't end with sleep. It continues through you, through every breath you take, with lungs shaped by evolution. Through every thought you have, with a brain built over millions of years. Through whatever you do tomorrow that makes use of your inherited capacities. Thanks again for this journey through deep human history, for sitting with the uncertainty and the wonder, for honoring the forgotten ancestors by learning about them. The 6 million years appreciate it. Subscribe and stick around. The human story has many chapters we haven't explored. More mysteries, more ancestors, more evidence that you are part of something vast and ancient and ongoing. Sleep well tonight. Your ancestors survived predators and ice ages and volcanic winters so that you could be here. Rest on their behalf. You've earned it. They earned it. Good night from the deep past. From every hominin who ever walked the earth, from the lineage that stretches back 6 million years and forward to wherever we're going. 6 million years of evolution, countless ancestors. And here you are, hearing their story in the dark. Remarkable. Good night. But before you drift away completely, there is more to this story worth holding. The 6 million years weren't just about physical changes. They were about the emergence of something we might call mind. The slow awakening of consciousness in our lineage. When did our ancestors become aware that they were aware? We can't know for certain. Consciousness leaves no fossil. But at some point, beings existed who could reflect on their own existence, who could wonder, who could imagine what it felt like to be someone else. This capacity for empathy, for understanding other minds, is central to human nature. We spend enormous energy figuring out what others think and feel. We gossip, we worry about reputation, we build complex social alliances. All of this requires modeling other minds. The development of this social intelligence drove brain expansion. As groups grew larger and relationships more complex, the mental demands increased. Larger brains enabled more complex social structures. more complexity selected for larger brains. A feedback loop pushing cognitive evolution forward. Language emerged from this social pressure, not just naming things, but coordinating behavior, transmitting knowledge, telling stories that bound groups together. Language was a social technology before it was anything else. And with language came the possibility of culture that accumulated. Each generation could build on what previous generations had learned. Ideas could survive the death of the individuals who had them. Human knowledge became immortal in a way individual humans never could be. This is what makes human evolution different. Not just biological evolution, but cultural evolution running alongside it. And cultural evolution is faster. Much faster. The last 10,000 years have seen more cultural change than the previous 6 million saw biological change. But the cultural acceleration rests on the biological foundation. Without the brains that evolved over millions of years, culture couldn't accumulate. Without language, knowledge couldn't transmit. The quick is built on the slow. You are a participant in both evolutions. Your biology is the product of 6 million years. Your culture is the product of accumulated human learning. You inherit both, and you contribute to both, whether you intend to or not. The emotions you feel tonight have roots in the ancient past. Fear that kept ancestors from predators. Love that bonded them to mates and offspring. Curiosity that drove them to explore. Grief that marked the loss of those they cared for, all refined over millions of years. The moral intuitions you have also evolved. Fairness, reciprocity, care for the vulnerable, loyalty to your group. These aren't arbitrary. They're adaptations that helped our ancestors survive in cooperative groups where reputation mattered. Even the religious capacity might have evolutionary roots. The tendency to perceive agency and intention, the inclination toward ritual, the sense that there is more to reality than meets the eye. These emerge from cognitive systems shaped by millions of years. None of this means your feelings are fake or your morality is arbitrary. It means they're grounded in something deep. In a history that connects you to every human who ever lived. Your inner life is part of the 6 million year story too. When you fall asleep tonight, you'll dream. Dreaming appears to be ancient, present in mammals generally. Your ancestors dreamed too around their fires, processing the experiences of their days, preparing for tomorrow's challenges. The architecture of your sleep, with its cycles and stages, is inherited from ancestors who had to balance rest with vigilance. Deep sleep for restoration, lighter stages for monitoring threats. Sleep is an adaptation, like everything else. So as you drift towards sleep, you are doing something ancient. Something your ancestors did around fires in Africa millions of years ago. Something that connects you to the deep past in the most intimate way possible. Tomorrow you'll wake and continue living. Continue the human story in whatever way is yours. You might not think of yourself as part of a 6 million year lineage, but you are every moment. You are continuing what started so long ago. Maybe someday your descendants will look back and wonder about you. Wonder what your life was like, what you thought about, what you hoped for. You'll be an ancestor then, as mysterious to them as Lucy is to us. The chain continues through you, backward to forest apes, forward to whatever comes next. You are not the beginning or the end. You are a link, a moment in an ongoing story that stretches far beyond any individual lifetime. That is what the 6 million years really means. Not just biology textbooks and museum exhibits, but your life, your body, your mind, your children, or the children you influence, all of it part of something vast and ongoing. The ancestors don't speak to us in words. They speak in bone structures and brain architectures, in reflexes and instincts, in capacities for language and love and curiosity. They speak through us every day, whether we listen or not. Listen tonight, if you can. As you fall asleep, feel the weight of 6 million years settling into your body. The ancient inheritance you carry without effort. The gift of existence passed down through countless generations. You exist because every one of your ancestors survived long enough to reproduce. Every single one, through ice ages and predators and diseases and famines, through competition with other human species, through everything the world threw at them. That survival is your inheritance. The stubbornness, the adaptability, the refusal to give up. Whatever challenges you face them with the accumulated resilience of ancestors who overcame worse. Rest now in that inheritance. Let 6 million years support you like a foundation, like the ground beneath a house, invisible but essential, holding everything up without being noticed. Tomorrow the story continues, through you, through everyone you meet, through every human being alive, carrying the same inheritance, part of the same vast lineage, humanity as a continuous phenomenon, unfolding still. 6 million years before humans. Except it wasn't before humans. It was humans becoming. A process that started then and continues now. You are part of the becoming you always have been. Thanks for this time with the ancestors, with the forgotten story that made tonight possible, with the 6 million year journey that deposited you here. Now, listening to this, subscribe and stick around for more explorations of where we came from, more evidence that you are part of something vast, more stories from the deep past that illuminate the present. Sleep well. Dream of African landscapes where it all began, of ancestors walking upright for the first time, of fires lit against the darkness, of the long becoming that led to this moment. Good night from 6 million years ago, from every point along the journey, from everyone who lived and died, so that you could wonder about them tonight. The 6 million years are with you now. They always were, they always will be, carrying you into sleep, carrying you into tomorrow, carrying you into whatever comes next. Good night. Actually, one more thought before you sleep. The 6 million years shaped not just our bodies and brains, but our relationship with time itself. We're the only species that truly understands mortality, that can imagine our own death. When did this awareness emerge? Probably sometime in the last few 100,000 years. Neanderthals buried their dead with apparent care. They knew death was something, they felt its weight. They responded with ritual. This awareness changes everything. It creates the question of meaning. What does life mean if it ends? How should we live knowing we won't live forever? These questions arise only for beings who understand time. And perhaps these questions are a gift from our ancestors. The capacity to ask them, at least the ability to contemplate existence and wonder about its purpose, to search for meaning in a universe that doesn't obviously provide it. The answers, if there are answers, aren't coded in our genes. They're cultural creations, religions and philosophies and personal syntheses that each human works out for themselves. The capacity is inherited, the content is created. Tonight, you rest as a being aware of its own mortality, a being capable of asking why it exists, a being that can contemplate 6 million years of evolution and wonder where it fits in that story. That is remarkable. Out of all the species that have ever existed, we might be the only one that can do this. The only one that can look back at its own evolutionary history and understand it. The only one that can tell itself the story of how it came to be. We are the universe becoming aware of itself. That is one way to think about it. Matter organized into patterns complex enough to study matter. Evolution producing beings that can study evolution. A strange loop in reality. And you are part of that awareness tonight. One node in the vast network of human consciousness. One perspective on the 6 million year story. One inheritor of everything our ancestors developed. The deep past is never really past. It lives in your body, your reflexes, your emotions, your social instincts, your capacity for language and love and fear and wonder. The ancestors are present in every moment of your experience. When you feel love for someone, you are using emotional machinery refined over millions of years. When you feel fear in the dark, you are responding to threats that haven't been real for your lineage for millennia. The past shapes everything. And when you wonder about meaning, you are exercising a capacity that might be unique in the cosmos. A capacity that emerged from 6 million years of brain expansion and social complexity and language development. A capacity that belongs to no other species we know. Be gentle with yourself tonight. You are carrying a lot. 6 million years of evolutionary history. The accumulated trauma and triumph of countless ancestors. The questions that arise from being aware of your own existence. But also be amazed. You are here against all odds. The product of 6 million years of successful reproduction. The inheritor of everything your ancestors developed, a being capable of understanding its own story. That is not nothing. That is quite something. Whatever else is true about your life, that is true. You are the latest expression of an ancient lineage, the current form of a project that has been running for millions of years. Sleep now as part of that project. Rest in the continuity that connects you to every human who ever lived. Let the 6 million years hold you as you drift into unconsciousness. Tomorrow the sun will rise as it has every day since long before humans existed. The world will continue its cycles, and you'll wake. One more time, as a human being, one more day of the ongoing story. The 6 million years before humans weren't really before, they were during. During the becoming that is still happening, during the story that includes tonight. During the long emergence that produced this moment, You are not at the end of evolution. You are in the middle. Evolution continues through you and everyone else. What happens next is partly up to the choices humans make. The story isn't finished, but for now, rest. Let the questions settle. Let the ancestors keep watch, as they have through all the nights of human history. Let sleep come as it has to every human who ever lived. Thanks one more time for this journey through deep time, for considering where you came from, for honoring the forgotten story that made your existence possible. The 6 million years are part of you now. They always were. But now you know it. Now you can feel the weight and the wonder of carrying such an inheritance. Carry it well. Pass it on. Add whatever you can to the story. And rest tonight, knowing you are part of something vast and ancient and still unfolding. Good night from 6 million years of human evolution. From every ancestor who ever lived. From the lineage that made you and continues through you. 6 million years. And here you are, remarkable. Good night.